Everyone, and welcome to Central Asia Institute's webinar, Central Asia Celebrates Nowruz. My name is Silai Karzai. I am the Communications Manager at Central Asia Institute, and I'm your event host today. For those of you who may be new to our work, Central Asia Institute advances access to education, especially for girls and women, in some of the world's most remote and hard-to-reach corners. This work is possible because of our local partners in Tajikistan, Pakistan, and Afghanistan, who help steer programs on the ground and are deeply embedded in the communities we serve. Together with these partners, we're able to reach the most remote villages, tailor our programs to local realities, and support women and girls who might otherwise be left behind. We'll be getting started in just a moment, but before that, I'll share a quick overview of what you can expect during the next hour. Here's our agenda for today. We'll begin with opening remarks, then move into a special presentation from our guest, Dr. Kassam, about Nowruz and the rhythms of life. Then we'll look at the impact of our women's entrepreneurship programs on women, their families, and their communities. We'll then transition to a panel discussion and audience Q&A where you'll have the chance to pose questions directly to our speakers. As we go along, please use the Q&A box to ask any questions. The Q&A box should appear at the bottom of your Zoom window. Please note that the chat box is disabled to streamline audience participation. So please use the Q&A box for any questions. All guests will remain muted and off camera for the entire event, but you can ask questions at any time during this session, and we'll turn to those at the end. Today, you'll hear from our guest speaker and from two of Central Asia Institute's representatives. Moin Khan has served as a member of Central Asia Institute's board since 2022. An attorney and international development leader with over 15 years of experience around the world, he is a passionate advocate for education and women's empowerment in South and Central Asia. Dr. Karim-Aly Kassam is the International Professor of Environmental and Indigenous Studies at Cornell University. His research focuses on the complex connectivity of human and environmental relations, addressing indigenous ways of knowing, food sovereignty, sustainable livelihoods, stewardship, and climate change. In partnership with indigenous communities, his field research has taken him to the Pamir Mountains of Afghanistan, Kyrgyzstan, and Tajikistan, among other regions. Zia Sanaban is Central Asia Institute's program manager. Zia works closely with our in-country partners to shape our education and entrepreneurship programs. He has extensive experience working with development, humanitarian, and government organizations in Afghanistan. And with that, now it is my great pleasure to pass the mic to Moin Khan.
Thank you, Sila, and hello, everyone. I'm Moin Khan, a member of the board of directors here at Central Asia Institute. I'm joining you today from Germany, where I help advance workers' rights, environmental accountability as the executive director of SupplyTrace, an open access research and data-driven supply chain transparency platform. I've been very fortunate that my professional life has taken me across the globe, including Afghanistan. Through it all, I've always been drawn to work that invests in people, especially women, who are at the pulse and backbone of healthy, thriving communities. As someone with close connections to the region, I know firsthand how empowering it is to have access to opportunities that can completely change the course of someone's life in the face of so many challenges. That's why I've been long invested in the work that CAI does, especially in Afghanistan. And that's why I'm so glad to welcome you to today's event, Central Asia Celebrates Nowruz. As you'll hear from today's guest speaker, Nowruz marks the beginning of spring and turning over a new leaf, which is the same spirit that drives participants in our Women's Entrepreneurship program, who continue to improve their lives and the lives of their wider communities. We've seen again and again that when women have access to education, skills training, and financial opportunities, everything changes. The economic inclusion of women lifts families, strengthens communities, and drives progress for entire nations. Before we begin, we want to pause to acknowledge the recent violence, hardship, and uncertainty that so many are facing right now. Our deepest sympathies are with everyone who is hurting. Let's keep them in our hearts as we move forward. Thank you all again for being part of this wonderful event. And now it's my pleasure to turn it over to our guest speaker, Dr. Karim-Aly Kassam. Thank you.
I hope you can hear me now and you can see my screen. I think this is an important moment in the year, and it's an important historical moment for me to talk about Nowruz and the rhythms of life. Because Nowruz, which literally means new day, is about change and is about life. And right now, we do need to engage the question of life. So, in my presentation with you this afternoon, I want to first explain my own perspective. These are the regions of the world where I undertake research at high latitudes, in the circumpolar Arctic, amongst indigenous peoples and the northern forest, and at high altitudes in mountainous regions in Central Asia. And these regions are the borders of the Cold War. So I work on both sides of those borders. These regions have suffered from colonialism and the impact of colonialism on both sides. But these regions are also the regions where we have significant biodiversity, cultural diversity, and these regions are pregnant with renewable and non-renewable resources. So while there is a dramatic history in these regions, and while the impacts of climatic variation is quite significant in these regions, there are elements of these regions and the agency of the indigenous peoples in these regions is key when we're talking about hope. Now, indigenous peoples in rural, in Arctic, northern forests, coastal and mountain societies are at the vanguard of the climate crisis. They're at the forefront. And this is having a direct impact on their food systems and their livelihoods. The UN estimates that 70 to 80% of the global food system depends on the small landholder and the small herder. So that means no Manhattan, no Berlin, no Beijing, if the small landholders are wiped out, because they supply the food system for the planet. Now, the problem with this is that many of those community members that engage in livelihoods that are related to the land, and keep in mind that Nowruz and the vernal equinox are directly linked to the land because it's about change. Those people that are engaged with the land, and they fundamentally include women. Women are herders, women are farmers, women are orchardists. And in the villages, some of the villages where I work, women are also hunters. And so fundamentally, the backbone of these societies are the women because the food system is the core that allows everything else to exist. And the problem is that with this dramatic climatic variation, it is the intensity, the frequency, and the unpredictability that is causing harm. So people are not afraid of change. Nowruz is all about change. It is about life and new life and revitalization. So they're not afraid of change. It's the unpredictability and the nature of that change that causes anxiety. And one way to understand that is to think about our situation during COVID-19, how we faced dramatic impact and how uncertainty was from day to day, from hour to hour, as we learned new things about the pandemic. Now, apply that in the context of Indigenous peoples in these areas, and you can understand the injustice of it all because there's a long history of colonization. In some places, there's been continuous war and violence, and now this climatic variation that is causing difficulties. So, what I'd like to do is talk about Nowruz and, by implication, hope, talk about ecological calendars in the context of how, in my own research, I had to build hope, and the ecological calendars are an element of that, and what it means for us today. And hopefully, at the end, in the panel, we will have a chance to discuss and ask questions. So, Nowruz is the vernal equinox. It's spring. It's a moment of change. It literally means new day, and it is about new beginnings. Now, what is fascinating about Nowruz is that it is simultaneously diverse. People of different ethnicities, different linguistic groups, different religious interpretations from Japan all the way across North Africa uh, celebrate the vernal equinox. And simultaneously, it is a moment of unity because it is fundamentally about humanity's relationship with their habitat, with the earth. And this is important to keep in mind as we think about hope, that simultaneously diversity and unity are working at this moment at the vernal equinox. And that unity is given birth, given life because of our connection to the land, because Nowruz is the moment of revitalization, and it is a commitment to life, the love of life, which is biophilia. So that's the background. Now, a little bit about hope. Hope is a vision for the future. It has to be imaginative because it is a vision. It requires empathy because it means that we need to understand each other in our current time frame, but also empathy for the future and the past. It is reasoned, it is thought through, it is earned, and therefore it's demanding. So hope is not this empty feeling that somehow descends upon us. It is something that we build methodologically because it has to be action oriented. And because it's action oriented, hope, just like anything else, is a strategic and tactical response to conflict, to harm, to violence. So, let me tell you about my own journey about hope. I'd like to share with you our research on ecological calendars. Now, in the 1990s, we learned about the dramatic impact of climate change in the Arctic when I was doing research. And as we were doing that research, the community members told us, well, can you tell us what is happening to our habitat? So hope asks the question, what is the purpose of knowledge to a person like me? It is a fundamental question that a professor or a scholar or a student needs to address. And it asks the question, what is the purpose of research and teaching anyway? Because all of that is supported by the taxpayer. That's where the funding comes from. So hope has to be grounded in the culture and the ecology of the person and the people that we're working with. So in 2006, when I went to Central Asia, I learned about Indigenous peoples there giving meaning to time on their human bodies. They measure time from the toenail all the way to the head and then back again, all the way through on their bodies. The land, their body, and time were not separate. And that's how they gave meaning to time. Now, that's something very unusual to see. And what they used was elements like the first frost, the first snowfall or the last snowfall, blossoming of trees, appearances of animals or insects or plants, arrival of a particular migratory bird, the sound of a frog, to actually measure time and then to connect it to their activities, whether it is harvesting, whether it's moving herds, whether it is time to go hunting, whether it is time to sow. So they connected their habitat to their body, and their body informed them of what action they needed to take within what they call their home. So when we heard about this, we began to do research. We looked at ancient Persian manuscripts that are 1,000 years old, and we translated them. And we learned that peoples in this region were using ecological calendars, calendars of the human body as they referred to them, and that in fact, because they've been using it for thousands of years, these people had to adapt and change their calendars because over 1,000 years, of course, you have climate change. And then we went to Russian and German ethnographic data, and we started mapping where there was evidence. And the green dots on this map is where we began to find evidence. And in the language, we began to find evidence that historically how they use these ecological calendars. So we began to think about these ecological calendars, and we asked ourselves a question: how can these calendars help us anticipate climatic variation? How can they help us anticipate climate change? And so we stepped back and we said, what if knowledge is not in our heads, but in the relationship we have with our habitat? Now, I know this sounds esoteric, but think about it. When you sit, when somebody asks you, let's say your son or your daughter asks you, can you please tell me the password to your laptop because I need to get something for mom from there? And you're not able to repeat it. But the moment you sit down at the keyboard, suddenly the password comes to you. There is a tactile sense of how knowledge is fundamentally related to our interaction with our habitat. And so we said, what if knowledge is really not something we hold in our heads, but something that is in the relationships with our environment? And then we asked the question, what if time itself is a unique experience? Now, in our economic system, we believe time is fungible, it's tradable. But think about it for a moment. I think all of us are old enough to remember the moment of the first kiss with the one we deeply cared about. And we tried to extend that kiss to at least 15 minutes. And then the question is, well, those 15 minutes, are those 15 minutes of joy the exact 15 minutes that we would experience at the dentist getting a root canal? Clearly, they are different experiences, and therefore those two elements of time are completely different. So what if we viewed time as a unique experience? And that within that unique experience, what if we saw time as relational, related to the habitat, related to one another, related to our body, related to the work of women? And within that relationality, what if we thought of time as flexible? And as we began to think about things that way, we thought these ecological calendars, or these calendars of the human body, could help us anticipate climate change. because they would be unique enough, they would be specific enough for a village, for a valley, for an ecological zone, for a cultural niche, and they would be integrated. So the calendar for a town or a certain part of Manhattan or a certain part of Montana would be different than another part. Even 1,000 meters would make a significant difference in those calendars. So we thought, what if we could get something so specific that would help us understand climatic variation? So let me take a minute and explain to you what do I mean by relational and flexible. So imagine on May 1st, we see the appearance of a specific flower. We decide to seed on May 1st. And at the beginning of September, we have an amazing harvest. Now there's some climatic variation and the rainfall is early, but we want to be exact and concrete about our dates. So we see the plant, we see the flower blossom in April, but we wait till May 1st. And in September, we have a very poor harvest. But what if we followed the relationship? We see the blossom, we plant the seed, and earlier in August, we have a harvest. So this is what I mean that when time is unique experience, within that unique experience, we should look at it as flexible and as relational. So keeping that in mind, now remember, I'm compressing 40 years of research into a 20-minute talk. So with that in mind, we developed a proposal for 1.2 million euros to be able to undertake research that is grounded in the socio-cultural and ecological context of various parts of the world. So in the United States, we worked with a community that has voted for the current president, and in 2016 had also voted for the current president. So you can imagine what perspective they had on climate change. And we worked with a community at the Standing Rock Sioux Nation, which is in both North and South Dakota, 2.3 million acres. And we worked in Sarimugul, which is in the Alai Valley in Kyrgyzstan, and in the Bartang Valley of Tajikistan, where you have programs in the villages of Roshorv and Sonab. Now, in order for us to do the work, you have to understand that that knowledge about ecological calendars had been suppressed, both on the market economy side because of colonization, and on the command economy side because of colonization. So we had to think about how we would build back that understanding. Now, according to my understanding, transdisciplinarity or interdisciplinarity is when people talk, when people who are doing research talk to those who are engaged in practice. So interdisciplinarity is not when an anthropologist talks to a climate scientist and a climate scientist talks to an ecologist. They're supposed to do that because they're funded by the taxpayer. That's their responsibility. Transdisciplinarity is when all of them collectively engage the farmer, the hunter, the gatherer, the fisher, the teacher, the tourism operator, the county sheriff. That's when we're engaging in transdisciplinarity because we're taking their knowledge, their practical wisdom, and engaging it with our knowledge. So, how did we begin our research? In all those communities, we began with a meal. We would sit down and we would say, here are some ideas. Tell us what your priorities are and what your concerns are. And including in all the villages that I described, as well as the town at Oneida Lake that voted for the president then and for the president now. The priority was always about the variation in weather that was affecting their livelihoods, their food systems. So over that meal, we decide what the research agenda will be, who we will work with, who we will interview, and how we will collaborate. Once we begin that research, we start undertaking interviews together with community members. We then go back and analyze the data we have gathered. And data is not just interviews. We built climate stations in the communities where we undertook work and at high altitudes where they herd their animals. And we also put in moisture sensors in the soil so we could get information because in many of these places we didn't have data. So then we would go back and present that information to the villagers and we would validate the findings. We would say, is this what you told us? And often there would be discussion and disagreement, and we would make changes. And then we would go back, build the ecological calendar, and go back to them and say, does this work for you? And after we have gone through this process of validating and discussing, then we produce a publication that goes to the community and it is for their use. So let me give you a sense of how we did our research, how we built hope. We would start by saying, how do you know that winter is ended? Meaning, how do you know that spring has arrived? And then they would tell us all these indicators that they use. And often it would be a series of indicators that they use, not just one. And then they would explain how that indicator is linked to their activity, what kind of hazards they experience at that time, what kind of social activities that they undertake in their community centers because of these different indicators. With the start of spring or at autumn when they harvest or in the winter. And so they explain that to us. So by the way, I'm giving you the seasonal rounds of Oneida Lake, which is the community that was non-Indigenous, that worked, that voted for the current president and had some questions about the existence of climate change. Once we have taken that seasonal round that I just showed you, we identify the indicators. We worked with botanists and climate scientists to see which indicators are best under conditions of climate change. And then we developed the ecological calendar. We would go, like I explained, to each and every community and have discussions, present the research, present the calendars, and discuss issues with them, including conflicts. So conflicts and not having consensus is not a bad thing. It gives us options because when we talk through it, we can understand why these differences exist. And so we did that for all the communities that we worked with. And then we developed the ecological calendar. By the time we finished that work, the pandemic had already hit us. So I'm showing you it. Each one of our ecological calendars is different. I'm showing you a calendar from the Bartang Valley that is conveyed in a manner that the people of that region would understand and using symbols that the people from that region would understand. So we would convey these ecological calendars according to the context. So we are in the pandemic. It's October 2021. We have finished the research. So we went to the State Department, and it wasn't as easy as I'm describing it, but you can imagine because all of you understand the State Department and who was in charge during the pandemic. We asked them to open the borders. We enabled the villagers from the Arctic to Central Asia to be able to get a passport because many of them never had passports. We got them vaccinated according to the rules of the United States, not just the WHO. And then we got them on the plane and we met in person at Cornell. But we didn't meet in academic offices. We met at the Botanic Gardens. So this is at our Botanic Gardens. And at our Botanic Gardens, our research was displayed as a form of art. And in fact, the man who runs the particle generator, the one who collides atoms, developed a mobile of all of our calendars and put that image up, three-dimensional image up in the roof of the Botanic Gardens. So in the morning, we would meet at the Botanic Gardens and discuss our research findings in the presence of our research as a form of art. In the afternoon, we would go to the Johnson Museum. And at the Johnson Museum, we had 26 Indigenous artists from North America and Central Asia, and we requisitioned their work or we bought their work and discussed the struggle that was related to the environmental crisis we're facing. And again, we had our meetings and we discussed our findings. And then in the evening, we would meet at the Center of Performing Arts. And at the Center of Performing Arts, there would be dance and song that is related to the issues we're engaging in. And we also held our meetings. So we would move our locations in a way that we could transfer that knowledge. So here is an image of that meeting where we had over about 100 people during the pandemic, and we met in person and we followed all the rules. We have an image of the book that we produced for the communities. And then in 2023, by that time, there was a war between Tajikistan and Kyrgyzstan, and the borders were closed. So we found ways, just like we found the way for the State Department to open the border during the pandemic, we found ways to get the books up at that high altitude and meet with the villagers and share with them our findings and talk to them about our findings and return their knowledge back to them. And so we had to cross through mountain passes between these countries. And having shared that, then we turned our attention to the academic needs. So we had honors students, we had master's students, we had PhD students, we had professors. So we invited people, artists, poets, scientists, government scientists, university scientists, to publish our research findings. But we didn't pick an interdisciplinary journal or a humanities journal. We wanted to go straight to the people who are dealing with climate issues. So we published our research in a journal called GeoHealth, and we published 11 articles from the Roman Empire to Central Asia today, from the Arctic to Africa. We produced findings that we had, as well as we invited others to publish their findings, and we produced an academic work that would then get credit for all the hard work that was being done by the students and other researchers. So what does all of this research mean for us today? Well, remember, it's about Nowruz, and Nowruz is about spring, and spring is about hope, and hope really matters right now. Well, the first thing he tells us that hope requires work and nurturing. Hope is not some easy task. And even for a professor or a student or a community member, it requires work and it requires reflection. Second thing, hope values difference. The reason why we were able to build this knowledge is we recognized that we didn't know enough, that the women in the communities, the men in the communities, the herders, the farmers, the hunters, had a kind of knowledge that was key. In fact, their knowledge was the basis for us to develop those ecological calendars. Third, Nowruz itself restores our connection to the land, because suddenly the land around us becomes alive and wakes up. And as it's waking up, it excites us and it gives us amazing energy. So it is about a connection to the land, and Nowruz restores that connection. And finally, the research conveys an ethic for the love of life, because Nowruz is all about life and life restoring itself and giving itself unto other life. So that's all I have to say, and I hope that we get a chance to discuss during the panel. Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing your insights, Dr. Kassam. Now, before I pass the mic to Zia, we want to share a brief video from Bibi Hiwa, a woman from Afghanistan who runs a successful mushroom cultivation business. She would like to share a few words of how the program has supported her in her native language. Thank you for your patience. Our video is unfortunately not working right now. However, we will be sure to share this video with you after our webinar concludes. In the meantime, I'd like to turn it over to our program manager, Zia Sanaban, for an in-depth look at the success of our women's entrepreneurship programs.
Thank you, Silay. So yeah, starting from where we work in Central Asia, um, we have a map here for a better clarity. As you see on the right, we have identified places where we currently have programs. So we work in Tajikistan, in the eastern part. We work in the northeast of Afghanistan, and also in the northeast of Pakistan. With regards to our Women Entrepreneurship Program, we actually started it in 2019 from Tajikistan. Then we came down to Pakistan and started that program in 2021. And then most recently, we piloted a program in Afghanistan in 2025. Next slide, please. And so what we do under our Women's Entrepreneurship Program, we basically provide skills training for women, for participants. Then we also train them on entrepreneurship skills. And then after that, we help them with the startup kits, with the to start their businesses through startup kits, cash assistance, and so forth. And then we provide support so that they can establish their businesses. Through all this support, we aim to enable those women to rediscover their agency and realize their aspirations. On the right, you see, sorry, thank you. On the right, you see a small cooperative of women who have who are here sampling their products, and most of these products are sold locally and have a lot of customers. Now, next slide, please. A brief information about our program success so far. Only in 2025, as we reviewed the records, we had trained more than 360 women in these three countries. And if you talk specifically about the countries, we trained 102 women in Afghanistan, 115 in Tajikistan, and 116 in Pakistan. And so after their training, they were able to establish their small businesses. And through those small businesses, almost all of them were able to to have income through those businesses and increase their household income significantly. Now, if we talk specifically about the countries in Afghanistan, those women were able to double their income. In Pakistan, they achieved 60% increase in their income, and in Tajikistan, 50%. So this was one aspect of our program success. Another aspect of our program has been that these programs have been able to bring on board women who have not had any opportunities in the past. In some cases, our programs have been life-saving for those participants. On the right, you see the women who are uh, participants of our programs, and they are working on their products right now. They are dehydrating and processing, packaging, labeling their products, which are amazing apricot in Pakistan. Next slide, please. So about the opportunities that we have in those countries and communities where we work. First of all, we have very supportive we have very supportive communities there. Those communities have been we have been working with them, and they've been supporting our programs since long time. And the second opportunity we have is local partners. And local partners, in fact, bring local context, local knowledge, and also the relationship that they have with those communities. Together, these local partners and local communities, they are enabling us to design our program based on the real need on the ground, and also foster that long-standing relationship. And so also have this sense of ownership in those communities. And beside these opportunities, we have a very robust monitoring and evaluation system in place. And so the monitoring and evaluation system is in the communities, done through those community members, and then later on by our local partner, and through our third-party monitoring and evaluation consultant that we hire from time to time, and they do the monitoring and evaluation. Next slide, please. And so with those opportunities and success that we have briefly noted our impact here as well. Our programs actually have increased the income of those participants significantly. And that, in turn, have enabled those participants to be able to make decisions at home and have influence in the decision making in their families, in their communities. Our programs have also increased confidence and improved agency of those women in their families and in their communities, which we have been planning for and we had set our goals for. Next slide, please. Here, allow me to share a few stories from our program participants. On the right, you see Moasiba, one of our program participants from Itharchi village in Badakhshan, Afghanistan. She is a mother, 21 years old herself. She is a member of a big family of 16 household members. And so she has been trying to, first of all, complete her education and become a teacher. But after the restrictive policies of the new government, she has not been able to continue her education. And through the through her community, she has been enrolled in our program. And so after receiving the training and the startup kit and the support, and also the cows that she has received, she has started a small business. You see in her own word that for the first time in months, she feels like she is able to dream again. And she's thankful to CEI, to our local partner, and to the donors who have been donated this and contributed to her success. And now she has hope, she has dignity, and she feels that she is independent. This is one of the stories. Next slide. Another story we have is from Tajikistan. Rajab Sultan, as you see, she is working in her small beauty salon as a lash technician. She has been working actually for a long time in Russia, and then she has been deported. Coming back to her community, she has not had any opportunity to work, any opportunity to start her life again. And then um, she has been introduced to our program by local community members. After receiving the training and the startup kit and the support, she's been able to start her small business, beauty salon, and then um, she's been able to start having clients. And now she is running her business and she's proud of that. And now she says that there is nothing impossible if she is working hard and looking and looks for opportunities. Next slide, please. Yes, that was the stories that I wanted to share with you. Thank you. Thank you for your attention. Silai, I'm turning it over to you, Robella.
Thank you so much, Zia, for your insights into our women's entrepreneurship program. So I'm going to turn it over to Bella actually for the next portion of our event.
Thanks, Eli. And hello, everyone. My name is Bella Pick. I am the Communications Associate here at Central Asia Institute, and I will be facilitating our panel discussion with Dr. Kassam and Zia Sanaban. And I'd like to first just thank all of our participants for joining our webinar. We are so happy to have you here. So, Dr. Kassam, thank you so much for your extremely insightful presentation. I'd like to start with you first. Can you help us understand and tell us what first drew you to study the relationship between the ecological rhythms and cultural traditions in the Pamirs?
So if you remember the calendar of the human body that I described, the vernal equinox, Nowruz, is literally at the heart of the calendar. So in their body, they measure the vernal equinox and the autumnal equinox, the harvest time, in September, at the heart. And so the cycle, and it doesn't matter which community you're talking about, the calendars vary, the days vary, the ethnicities vary, but on the vernal equinox, they were all at the heart. And that was a fundamental link between the human body and the culture, right? The linguistic group, the way they measured time. And that fundamental link demonstrated to us how the human being is not outside the earth, not outside the system, but within the system. And if I can just give a quick example how we as Americans can grasp that concept. If you remember Neil Armstrong, when Neil Armstrong was, in the military, and he had military training. When he landed on the moon, he said, "One small step for man, one giant leap for mankind." Now, what he meant, of course, in 21st century terms, is one small step for human and one giant leap for humankind. So Neil Armstrong, American citizen, soldier, as soon as he turned around and looked at the planet, he forgot all the borders and his connection was directly to the land. That's what drew me to this. The calendar of the human body was fundamentally about the earth itself and us existing within it.
Thank you. Yeah, it's so interesting seeing the connection between landscape and culture and how it naturally leads to these seasonal rhythms that, communities follow. So thank you very much. Zia, I will now turn it to you. Why is entrepreneurship such a powerful lever for change in rural and mountainous communities?
Thank you, Silai. Well, the communities where we work in rural mountainous areas, they are usually characterized by having little opportunities, limited opportunities, particularly for women. And so the programs that we have, especially women entrepreneurship, is responding to that exact gap and need. And so these kind of opportunities for women are the opportunities that they are looking for and responding to their need. And in addition to that, our programs are locally led and are based on funding from the assessments that we conduct. For example, for Afghanistan, when we piloted last year, we did two needs assessments. And after that, we narrowed it down to two particular programs. And so those programs are responding to the need of those communities. Now, one of the needs, if we go on, is food security. And so, for example, in the case of Afghanistan, around 40% of the population is food insecure, severely food insecure. And so these programs are designed in a way that respond to those food insecurities, actually producing those food products that are helpful for the families and for the communities.
Thanks, Zia. It's really nice to see how, entrepreneurship can unlock opportunity in places where economic options are limited. So that's super interesting to hear. We will
Yes.
end our panel discussion with one question for you, Dr. Kassam. But before we end with this last question, once again, I just want to thank all of the participants who joined our webinar. And we are slightly behind schedule. So if you need to leave the webinar at the top of the hour, you're welcome to do so. And a recording will be available on our YouTube channel. But for those who can stay, we will just continue with this last question with a panel discussion, which then in turn will extend a couple minutes beyond the 60-minute mark. So just wanted to let everyone know that. So Dr. Kassam, we will end with you. In your research, across Afghanistan, Tajikistan, and Kyrgyzstan, what role does food play in maintaining both cultural and biological diversity, would you say?
Okay. So food is central for survival, whether we're talking about the Arctic or the mountainous regions that you have mentioned in Afghanistan, Tajikistan. It is central for survival in the sense that it is sustenance, and it is how people are connected to the land. but it is also central because it adds the cultural dimension. So we often think, particularly in North America, that we are sustainable because we grow our own food. But really, that's not how it works. We grow some of our own food. And then there is some of our food that's central to our culture, but we trade it with somebody else because the biodiversity in their region is specific to that context, ecological zone, but because of their human relationship with us, we are able to get some key elements of some very important foods to us because it's core to our culture. It may not be core to their culture. And so food is how human beings are united. So there is the sustenance part. But when you think about trade and food among people of different lands, because imagine a mountain. A mountain has different ecological zones. So we're already dealing with difference, right? When you go on a hike in the mountain, you're constantly seeing difference. So we're dealing with that same difference amongst peoples. So trade between these peoples related to food or other commodities is not about just trading that commodity. It's about trading ideas. It is about relationship building. So in the Pamir Mountains, there is trade. Let's take Afghanistan for an example. In Afghanistan, where people are saying there is a continuous 50-year civil war, right? We have sent NATO there. We know all about it. My research is showing, my published research in scientific journals is showing that actually people of different languages, and I mean completely different language families, these families are not even related, different ethnicities are looking after each other's food security during this continuous war. So you're sitting there going, okay, there's religious difference, there's ethnic difference, there's ecological difference, and yet people are actually taking care of each other. Farmers and herders are looking after each other, which completely changes the narrative of the war because at the core of that food system are women. And these different communities are sharing food with each other, herders and farmers, and they're not killing each other. So then it changes the entire dimension of the discussion. So you saw our research began with food. We sat down and had a meal. That's how we begin a relationship. So I hope that in very basic terms, I've been able to describe why food is key to biological and cultural diversity.
Well, thank you so much. So interesting. Thank you so much, Dr. Kassam and Zia, for your thoughtful answers and for just giving us a glimpse of what Nowruz and life is like in the countries we work in. So due to time, we are unfortunately not going to be able to answer any audience questions, but please feel free to email us at communications@centralasiainstitute.org and we will answer any questions. And that is also in the chat if you need the email. Once
And
again,
I will respond to any questions that are aimed at me. I give you my word.
thank you, Dr. Kassam. And thank you, everyone. I will now hand it over to our webinar host, Silai.
Thank you so much, Dr. Kassam. Thank you so much, Zia, for your insights into the heart of Nowruz. Thank you, and thank you all, everybody, for your participation and insightful questions during today's event. All of our work is possible thanks to you. We are so grateful for your support. As you'll hear in the video we'll share later from Bibi Hawa, the benefits and process of mushroom cultivation, of dairy processing, of apricot and fruit dehydration go well beyond the technical aspects. These programs help support whole systems change, where women are change makers and leaders who uplift their families and their entire communities. As a donor, there's some ways you can support us and continue and help support program participants in the areas where we work. So you can scan the QR code that appears on your screen or click the link in the chat to directly support the different activities in our women's entrepreneurship programs. You can also visit our website and click on the orange donate button to give. Whether you're funding women's technical or business education or supporting women to start a dairy processing cooperative, every amount matters. Your support will help women in Afghanistan, Pakistan, and Tajikistan to transform their lives through entrepreneurship. And in the spirit of Eid, turn your blessings into abundant opportunities for those denied an education because of poverty and discrimination. Help us educate a girl and help us support women's economic inclusion this Eid. Again, thank you for joining us today. Please save the date and join us for our next webinar on June 17th for another update on our work. And don't forget to connect with us through our profiles on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, and Blue Sky. Thank you again for your support. We hope to see you next time.